Hey team, this is Grant David Collins, and welcome to Basement Philanthropy, a place for people who do not want to wait until they're rich or retired to create meaning, impact, and connection with their time, talents, and money, regardless of the amount. On this episode, we're going to be talking about giving first personal finance with my good friend, Chris Claflin. So let's get started. Chris Claflin is one of those guys that when you meet in person, you feel like you've known him for your entire life, even if it has only been a couple months. I first met Chris on LinkedIn, specifically as we began to interact with each other's content regarding giving and personal finance. Now, Chris is a personal finance coach, but what makes him a little bit unique and what really drew me to his content is that he has a giving first mentality when it comes to helping people get on top of and create what they want with their finances. And that really stuck out to me because so much of this personal finance space is focused on oneself that it was really refreshing to get a different perspective on the space in general. So when I heard that Chris was coming out to Utah, I had to snag him for a conversation in my basement. I think you're really going to appreciate this one. So let's get into it. Before we get into kind of the personal finance, where you're at now, kind of where you got to with this concept of giving and philanthropy. I'd love it if you would maybe reach back in your memory and maybe tell us about how you were first introduced to either of those concepts.
Yeah, I love that question. And knowing I was going to be coming here, I've been pondering on that a bit. And there's actually a lot of things that have come just flooded into my mind.
Cool.
And I've realized I've been really blessed to have really good examples around me of giving and philanthropy from a really young age.
Cool.
Very first one I'll tell you just briefly is Secret Santa, right? So when we were kids, 6 kids growing up in the household, and every year for Christmas, my mom and dad would, through their work association or church association or friend groups, they were aware of a family who may have fallen on a little bit harder times. And they would, rather than just giving them a cash gift, which is awesome, and I do not hate giving cash gifts. I'm not digging it.
Right.
But they found a way for us to keep our hearts in it and to learn and grow from it.
Cool.
So we would, for the 12 days, first we would research this family a little bit and learn about them, their kids, their interests. And then we would buy toys or bake treats. And each day for the 12 days of Christmas, we would go there secretly in our van. One kid, we would rotate turns. One kid would wear the ski mask. And,
full on operation.
We were 007.
Yes.
And thinking of it now, I can still feel the excitement and the adrenaline of this thrill of taking a little bit of your extra and giving it to someone who might not have extra. And, we would set it on the doorstep and ring the door and run or hide in the bushes sometimes and wait for him to, And I don't remember any of the families, but I remember the feelings that I had. And I remember thinking, I want this to be part of my life forever. The sacrifice on my end as a kid was small. I'd help bake the treat, or maybe $1 of my 10-month dollar allowance was going to a toy or something. But it's a very minimal sacrifice. But just I felt it was my first time feeling, wow, giving can change not only the receiver but the giver.
And when you talk about this feeling, what was that feeling, if you could describe?
I think it's in a feeling that we're all in this together. And it takes you out of the hustle and bustle, busyness of the stress of life, which I guess you don't have as much as a kid, but it takes you out of your own, whatever it is that you're currently focused on that's about you. It takes you out of that, and it makes you realize there's other people here in this journey, and they have needs. And if I have a little small way to help them in their journey, not only should I, but if I do, I grow and benefit and feel joy and feel connected in ways that I don't think in my life journey, I don't think you can find those exact feelings in that dose anywhere else.
I totally agree with that. And that's something that I've realized in my personal journey as well, is that it really sounds so simple, but really getting outside of ourselves, even if it's just like one step, is a huge piece of this equation, realizing that there are other people that are living lives.
Yep.
Some of them are different than ours.
Yep.
Some of them are less fortunate than ours.
Yep.
All those types of things starts to give you a perspective by which you can do something around.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Ultimately, I think most kids have great hearts, and most humans in general, and certainly kids, they're just born pure. And so when you show a kid a good example of giving and kindness, they love it.
Yeah.
I just remember as a kid thinking that was my favorite part about Christmas. Even as an 8-year-old kid, when you're pretty much focused on wanting your skateboard or your Daisy Red Ryder BB gun, right? Those days leading up to Christmas for me, as I think back, are tremendously more joyful than Christmas Day was. And I think you're spot on. I think parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents and whoever it is, whatever your relationship is to youth or young people, I think we have a duty to help show them not only us giving and being generous with our time and money, but involving them in that whenever we can and however we can.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is it doesn't have to be grandiose.
Yeah.
You don't need to teach a 6-year-old to save every dollar she ever can get her hands on and give some magic monetary gift to someone.
Yes.
It can literally be gifts in service of time, of listening. Certainly monetary gifts are great too, but it's not the only type of giving. Right.
Totally. I always tell people that there's 3 main resources that you can give: your time, your money, or your talents.
Yeah, I love it.
And whether you have excess in one or all of those, everybody on this earth likely has excess in one of those areas. And so it's a great way to start to just jump into the space.
I love that. I love what you said about finding the area where you have a little bit excess.
Yeah.
It might not be all 3 at once. The thing that pops to my mind is, even if you don't feel like you have excess in an area, if you can get outside of your own head for a second and look at somebody else's situation, compared to others, most likely we have excess in money always in America.
Yep.
And most likely, compared to people who are working crazy long hours, we probably have excess in time comparatively. Yep. And then in something that we're good at, we probably have an excess in that talent compared to others.
Right.
So if we get out of our own mind and just look at, not just those 3 things relative to ourselves, and relative to one another, if we look at those relative to others, we'll find we actually have excess everywhere.
Right.
And we can always give.
Yeah. So you go through this upbringing that focuses you a little bit more on giving over time.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or memory around when that started to become your part of the equation? Like, instead of like, this is what we do as our family.
Yeah. And I got my first job as a dishwasher at age 14. I started to have a little bit of my own cash.
Yep.
To my mind at the time, it felt like I had $10 million, but it's probably $183.
Right.
And I saw this is my moment to start to be generous. And it wasn't even a second thought for me. It wasn't like I was being cool or special. It was just kind of following the example of mom and dad.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, that was really powerful for me. My younger siblings, I'm the oldest boy, and my sister was out of the house pretty quick. So I was the oldest in the house for a lot of that. Yeah. And so I was able to take on sort of a little bit of a father giving figure for my siblings. Some stories that they would tell about, hey, let's go school clothes shopping, with big brother Chris's a little bit of extra money. Or, I remember a time buying just a game station for my brother, a GameCube, right? Yeah. Small things, not life-changing things, but it bonded us as brothers and sisters and as a family. I for sure received more in those relationships than I gave in monetary value by a factor of 100. Yeah. And that's a common theme in every type of giving I've experienced. Yeah. But I think that period in my life is when I started to say, oh, yeah, giving is something I can do now that I have some money.
Yeah. So how does this all, I want to kind of reframe this around something that you're very involved with right now, which is kind of the personal finance realm.
Mm-hmm.
You do personal finance coaching.
Yep.
Is it mostly for couples or how does that work?
I'll coach anyone. I have a good amount of clients who are single. But yeah, I think the vast majority so far of my clients have been couples. And I like that. I like helping. Personal finances can be a destructive force. It can be a stressful thing.
Yeah.
And so I like the uniting and strengthening of marriages through personal finance.
Cool. So how does this, we're looking at like the giving side of things. How does this emphasis or thought process around personal finance maybe start to blossom around this same time? You're starting to get a little bit of money. Seems like you have a little bit of a system if you're saving up for a GameCube for your brother or whatever that looks like. How does that start to form? Yeah,
I think there's no question that giving and personal finance are, inseparably connected.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about monetary giving. Time giving and talent giving, maybe a little bit less connected to personal finance, though you could make an argument that they're still pretty connected.
Totally.
Because if you're really bummed out and stressed out and barely making ends meet, you're going to be working extra jobs and not have much time.
That's right.
And you're going to feel the mental burnout and not have the desire to use your talents to bless someone.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, I think I started to see early that the more you were able to get control of your personal finances and have a system and a plan that wins, the more you'd be able to be generous in every way. And so there's this, and if generosity is one of the most joyful things we can do on earth, which I believe it to be, then it turns out that personal finance is a gateway to joy and peace.
Interesting.
Yep, through generosity.
Yeah. And so as you're kind of developing those two hand in hand, did you make that connection like pretty immediately or did that come over time?
Yeah. I want to say that it was immediate just because of it's always been in my DNA. So I don't think there was ever a moment where I said, "Oh, wow. I see now that that giving connects to personal finance." So I think it was at the beginning. In fact, I think a lot of finance gurus actually get giving backwards.
Yeah.
A lot of finance gurus teach that we should get rich and successful, for lack of better terms, so that we can one day give generously like no one else.
Futuristic. Yep.
Right. And it turns out that giving is a muscle.
Yes.
And if we don't build it, we don't have it.
Yep.
And so I actually teach clients and everyone who will listen to me on my soapbox that you need to give first. It's the first thing in your financial plan, not middle, definitely not last. And that means even if you're in high interest consumer debt that you're trying to crush, you should pick a giving goal. It can be small, but it should be something that connects to your heart and that matters to you. And you should start right now. And it's because there's so many reasons we could list why, Grant, but I think the biggest one is giving transforms us from scarcity to abundance.
Yeah.
And when we're in an abundant state, all the rest of our financial goals come easier.
Right.
We can crush debt better. We can build the emergency fund. We can pay for the kids' college. We can finally get the down payment for the home. Whatever it is we care to do, we can do better if we're not feeling scarce about money.
Yeah.
And so I tell people like, look, I know you have desires to give and you feel like you can't right now because you're buried under a mountain of debt. Start giving tomorrow and report back how it feels.
Yeah.
And I have people say, my life has changed in 24 hours. I used to have this fear around money thinking it was evil. And now I see that money can be a tool for good. And I want to take care of my money and pursue more money and grow my money so I can accomplish more good while I'm here. I've had people say that to me within 24 hours of their first time giving.
Wow. I feel like that's it's such a compliment to what we've been talking about this whole time, which is this concept of getting outside of yourself. There's so many benefits that happen from that, not only in the world around you, but in your personal life.
For sure.
And one of the things that I'm seeing in what you've just put out there is if you're in a place where you don't have control of your finances, it's likely because you have become a slave to something.
Yep.
Whether that is like showing up and being cooler than the rest of the Joneses,
Totally.
or whatever we find ourselves in that has created this scarcity or this lack of control in our lives. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing in what you're saying is that when you start to look outside of yourself, it's almost like you can then turn around and look at your life in a way that's like, what is actually valuable to me?
Right.
What is really important to me so that I can build a personal finance plan or whatever it might be around what actually matters instead of, what I think is going to make me happy or what George down the street has or what would show up great on my Instagram story.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting that mindset allows us to take a step out and then almost turn around and look backwards.
Yeah, it's powerfully said. I picture as you talk in my mind, a guy wearing glasses, maybe like yours.
Yeah.
And they're muddy and dirty and nasty. And that's what they're looking at the world and looking at themselves through. And giving would then be the process where you get to clean those, right?
Wow.
And now they're crystal clear.
Yeah.
Now, not only can you see the outside world better, but as you take a look honestly inwardly, you just have more clear vision.
Yeah.
And it's so profound, Grant, because it extends way outside of personal finance. When you give, you're able to show up more powerfully in every area of your life, whether it's fitness, as a parent, at work, in your finances, in your marriage. It is truly a transformative activity.
And do you, as someone that's involved with personal finance, there's a lot of people are involved with personal finance, thank goodness, because there's so much need out there.
Yeah. I see every one of those folks as an ally in this battle.
Totally agree. I have yet to consume content that has a giving first mentality. Do you find that as something that is not usually talked about out there?
Yeah, I found a couple of rock stars through LinkedIn that I have relationships with now who do sort of preach the same thing, but it's the vast minority.
Interesting.
Most of the pros teach you have to take care of all of your own stuff first so you can give one day. And that's partially true,
right?
Because in order to give to the magnitude, the capacity that you have within you, you do have to clean up your financial situation.
Totally.
There's no doubt, no question about it. But I think what's missing, like we talked about a second ago, is that those coaches don't help folks build a muscle throughout their journey. They just expect them to be super fit have super fit giving muscles when they arrive at wealth.
Yeah.
And we've seen many examples play out from celebrities and others where that just doesn't happen.
Right.
So I think the winning strategy, and the one that I teach, is you got to start from day one, no matter your situation. And it can be small, but there needs to be an intentional written plan about your giving, and your heart needs to be in it. It can't be giving to something someone else cares about or someone else told you should care about.
Yeah.
It has to be what you care about for it to really transform you from scarcity to abundance.
Yep.
And when that's present from early and often, then not only can you build more wealth and give more when you do it, but I think you accelerate your wealth building journey. You have more clarity and you have more of a powerful why that pulls you through everything. You want to get to this abundant generosity sooner.
Right.
Because you're experiencing it.
Yeah. It's so cool that they're so parallel. Every time I talk about giving and personal finance, there's just so much parallel. And the one that I want to bring up right now is this concept of exponential growth.
Yeah.
And with your money, you put it in, the sooner you put your money into vehicles that can produce exponential growth, the more exponential growth you'll get.
Yep.
Same thing when it comes to giving.
Yeah. It's so powerful.
Love that you're doing it. You're teaching it in a way that allows for that and gets rid of this notion that I'm really passionate about, which is that we cannot wait to give. Like that is just something that for some reason we're taught that, like from the very young age, like, hey, give when you're older, you're retired or whatever. And, we're setting people up like children with dynamite sticks when they're older because they have no idea what to do.
That's right. For that very reason, when I sit down with a client for the first time, after the consult, we're starting what I call boot camp now. We're going to get you in financial shape. The first session, the first thing we talk about is where are you giving right now? Like, what does that look like? And what's your goal for 10 years from now? And let's daydream about that for a second.
Cool.
And then part of what we do on the rest of the nuts and bolts is to build a plan that enables them to get there and for it to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And I can't describe to you, Grant, the transformation that I've seen happen in people's hearts and minds when they talk and daydream, either alone or with their spouse, if it's both of them, about giving.
Yeah.
They say either we're not giving or we're giving a little, we're giving here and there. But man, yeah, we have goals. We've thought and talked about this already. It's not the first time. And they start, and it just, you see them light up and it's exciting. And it gives a motivating force and factor in their financial journey, which can be drudgerous some parts.
Yes.
If they're in deep debt, that takes years sometimes. It's a grind.
Yep.
But I've seen folks speed and sprint through that much faster than others when they have clear goals for giving at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, because inherently it sounds like people already have this experience that they've gone into debt to get something that they thought would make them happy.
Yeah, right.
And it didn't.
And
when they experience giving and philanthropy or whatever that is, there's this well of like, oh my gosh, this is something that if I actually put time and effort into, I actually get back what I think I'm going to get. And most of the time it's even more. Yeah,
it's perfect. Nothing I can add to that. It's perfectly well said.
So maybe to round this whole conversation out, what I'd love to maybe spend the last part focused on is these experiences that you are creating or having yourself around giving, and maybe just sharing some examples for the audience to be able to hear what does this look like. So maybe you can share something that you and your family have done in this area.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a couple clients out there, and you don't have to mention their names if that wouldn't be appropriate, but that you could share so that the audience gets a bit of a picture around, okay, we've talked about setting these giving intentions and working into our personal finance. How does that actually start to show up?
Yeah, I love the question. My wife and I only have a few of our giving areas that we are open in public about.
Yes.
So a lot of our giving we keep to us. Great. But there's a few things we openly talk about, and not with the intent to say, look how cool we are.
Yep.
But because these few select areas are accessible to anyone.
Cool.
And they're really powerful. And so we like to share those examples so that people wherever they are in their journey can do that type of giving.
Totally.
So the first one I'll talk about, and you're in this space, so you've for sure heard of Kiva, I would imagine.
Yep.
But for the listeners, Kiva is basically a nonprofit organization that serves as they're sort of, for lack of better terms, they allow you to give micro loans, so any size, to often impoverished entrepreneurs worldwide.
Yep.
So this is not a donation. This is literally a loan. And they can be sort of crowdsourced. So, there might be a person in India looking to start a farm, and they need $2,500 for tools and seeds. You might not have $25 in your stage of life. You might have $100 you can give, but you can get in there with 24 other people who also have $100, and you can give this entrepreneur the loan they need. There's no interest on the loan. There's no guarantee of repayment, so it could end up being a gift.
Yep.
There's the scrappy and amazing entrepreneurs on Kiva have a crazy high repayment rate in the 95% plus.
Wow.
So you're likely to get your money back.
Cool.
And what's amazing, I call this compound giving, because you can take that $100 18 months later or 24 months later, and you can pick another entrepreneur. At that time, you might also have $500 more you can give, and you can maybe give $600 to someone or $100 to one person. However you want to split it is great.
Yeah.
But you can give the same dollar. You take the same dollars and give to multiple people.
Yeah, it's awesome. What other examples did you share, Chris?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of meeting about a month ago an individual who is abundantly generous and a mentor. I've made it a habit when I learn of someone who is generous to try to sit down with them and ask them about their plan, about how they do this, about what it means to them, how it's transformed their lives.
Wow, awesome.
And there was a guy I met or heard talking about going down to Mexico and building houses by hand for families in need.
Interesting.
And I was like, I got to ping him. So he was gracious and gave me some of his time when we went to lunch. As I got to know him, I learned he has, I don't remember, either 9 or 10 children.
Wow.
All adopted from the same family. So just incredible already there, talking about giving your time and talents.
Right.
But he takes his entire family down to Mexico. Last year was his 10th year in a row.
Wow.
Funds the whole thing and buys the materials for the house. And this is the coolest part. They'll find, the organization is called Casa de Cristo. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because I don't speak Spanish, but something like that. And he goes down there and someone locally has found a family in need, and you actually build the house side by side with the family.
Cool.
and connect and create a bond. And then you leave after 3 or 4 days. They've got a construction pro there watching over you and helping you stay on track.
Yeah.
But he talked to me about how, similar to my experience as a kid, like this has transformed his children and it's transformed him. And it's certainly been transformative for the families who live in this border town and went there for work, but are oftentimes living out of cardboard boxes because they're just making enough money to, send back to family or whatever the case may be. And as I looked into it, Grant, I was shocked at how accessible this is cost-wise for average Joes and Janes.
Wow.
It is not a gazillion dollars.
Yeah.
It's really attainable. For a lot of people, it might take a little bit of a saving goal.
Yeah.
But that type of real, involved, immersive giving experiences, those are everywhere.
Yeah.
We just have to keep our eyes open and peeled, and the world will have a way of bringing those in front of us.
Yeah. You've done something on with the way that you've described this that is really profound, in the sense that if someone were to draw a line between those two things, you can start to see an opportunity for this muscle to develop. So if someone starts off with $5 on Kiva and then moves through this ideological thought process to make it to this point where they're actually, instead of just being on an internet, they're actually involved with, maybe it's their first, if they don't even go, to some other country, maybe it's like, oh, wow, like, I wonder what I could do in my own community. And they get involved with a food donation or a homeless shelter or something like that that's in their like more close sphere. And then from there they say, okay, what could I do next? And, it just compounds into, maybe creating something like the man that you talked about, where he's traveling, he's got a network of construction people. Like, there's all these things that go into that, but that's not a today thing. But it can start out by a quick donation on Kiva or whatever you choose to do, and then looking outside in your local sphere of influence. And then over time, it's incredible how fast that builds.
Yeah, I love that. I think the key to giving is to start right now.
Yeah.
Right now. And if you're already giving some, then make your plan to how you want it to grow and by when.
Well, as we look to wrap up the conversation today, Chris, is there anything that's been on your mind as you've thought about what we've been talking about, and whether it's the mix between the philanthropy and the personal finance, or something that's just come out as you've been thinking about this topic that you would want to make sure that people hear? Yeah,
I mean, such a good question. I've kept on my phone a quote from a friend that I'll read. This is actually someone who was a client and has become a great friend.
Cool.
This was an individual who was, when we first met, in deep debt and in financial despair. They were feeling pretty hopeless and didn't see a way to crawl out. And they hired me as a coach, coincidentally, not even knowing my stance on giving.
Okay.
So they probably assumed I was a more traditional coach and that I'd start with, let's get you out of debt.
Right. And
in the first session, we sat down and I said, let's start giving.
Yeah.
And this individual was like, wait a second. I'm barely making my minimum payments on my debt. You haven't even looked at my situation yet.
Yeah.
And I said, it doesn't have to be big, but I want you to ponder tonight and pick something that matters to your heart and do your first gift. And this is, the individual came back in our next session. So 1 week later, and they said, right, I just donated to a charity that I believe in, and I felt a hate that I had developed towards money lift from my shoulders instantly. They said, I cried. I felt this massive burden that I didn't even know I had was lifted. I don't hate money now because my money can do so much good in this world. Wow. And I mean, if that's not a strong enough pull for you, listener, to start trying giving, no matter where you are in your journey, I don't know what else could be. So I feel like those are the closing words for me.
Wow, Chris. Yeah, that gave me goosebumps. That's pretty incredible to really see the power that giving has outside of just the good that it creates. And obviously that is an important component, but it's just so holistic and so widespread. So,
far-reaching.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you for coming down into the basement.
I loved it down here. I loved it. Didn't get attacked by any wild animals or anything.
That's right. It's not very scary. Sometimes people think basements are scary.
Not at all. Not at all. If Grant invites you on the pod, come on. It's fantastic down here.
That's right. All right. I'm just going to close this off real quick here, Chris. Well, team, that's it for me. Let's go out in the world and create good with the money in our pockets together. Talk soon.